I'm really excited to introduce the next two guests to the stage. First up is Jim Fowler. He's the Chief Technology Officer at Nationwide, Fortune 100 company, $42 billion insurer in Columbus, Ohio. Before joining Nationwide in 2018, Jim spent 18 years at General Electric. Most recently was the CIO of that company, where he led global IT strategy, services, operations, and the internal digital transformation efforts. Truly a ton of experience at a series of iconic companies. So welcome, Jim. And the second guest with us today is Marcello Damiani, the Chief Digital and Operational Excellence Officer at Moderna, a name that many of you are probably familiar with. He's been there a bit over 6 years. Prior to that, he was a group CIO at bioMérieux, and also held senior roles at Motorola. And again, Moderna is one of those names that many of us maybe weren't as familiar with a few years ago, but now it truly is a household name in more ways than one. Moderna is about a 10-year-old company that was founded on the promise of messenger RNA and now has dozens of projects in various stages of clinical trials. Marcello, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited to get your shared perspectives on the way in which you continue to innovate during times of uncertainty, which the last 12 to 18 months absolutely have been for so many of us, and definitely in more ways than one. One of the through lines that I've been getting through the conversations today is really the way in which companies have built a solid foundation of technology and infrastructure that's now allowing you to scale and unleash data and digital in a way that's allowing you to enable new experiences. And so, Marcello, I thought we'd start with you. Can you talk us through how you've scaled Moderna's technology over the last year and a half, and some of the lessons that you learned as you had to go really, really fast to get this vaccine out the door?
Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It didn't happen overnight. I mean, what everyone was saying is that you need to build a foundation. It takes time. So at Moderna, we decided from the early days, where we were less than 100 people, to build a digital company where we have data that help us in our learning of the science. And this was very handy when this COVID pandemic hit us, because all the learning that we had put in place and all the data that we had helped us move very fast into the clinic, and then into developing and having the vaccine authorized for use. So what we had to go through is really scaling up the environments to be able to support that endeavor. And scaling up the environment came in many places. On the manufacturing side, of course, but we had our manufacturing already set up in a digital way. So we had to configure the manufacturing to expand, but we didn't have to build anything special for it. Our supply chain, in this similar manner, we had to expand drastically our supply chain to be able to address the pandemic and distribute across the globe. So from early days, the data, the learning that we had helped us drastically. And what we've done really is use the power of that data to develop the vaccine.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, it's amazing how much of that information is able to really drive just amazingly fast progress. Jim, turning it over to you, you also mentioned that a lot of the work you've done at Nationwide has been around building that digital foundation that's now enabling you to create entirely new customer journeys, as well as a lot of self-service for your employees and your customers. Can you talk us through what you're prioritizing now and some of the things that are on your roadmap?
Yeah, Steven, thanks for asking. You know, I go back to earlier, if you were listening, I really was, I found Tim Buckley and John Marcante's discussion really important, because it's where we started, which was a belief about where the company is going, where the business is going, what our customers want. And core to that belief was this idea that we know we're moving from a world where decisions are made by people augmented by technology to a space where technology is going to make more and more decisions augmented by people. And so at the base of that, we created a digital chassis. And so we as a company for the last 5 years have been re-implementing all of our foundational transactional systems of record. We've been going API first, where we realize our APIs are really a representation of our business process. And so we've 52% of our business processes are now represented within an API. And what that's really allowed us to do is to scale quickly. So as this last year, as we've had to move to more self-service, as we had to get our workforce working from home, as we've had to to link into other partner ecosystems. The fact that we had that digital chassis in place and that we've had, a majority of our business processes exposed as APIs, it allowed us to move very quickly, where we can set up a new capability that a customer is asking us for in weeks versus kind of months and years in the environment that we had before we made these investments.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing too to think about as you start to scale up and you invest in those new architectures, APIs, and things like that. You've got more data than ever before that's moving through the organization faster than it ever was, and needing to get to people exactly when they need it. Marcello, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the ways in which you enable your team members at Moderna to take advantage of things like AI and machine learning and those new capabilities that come to pass as a result of having all this data at your fingertips.
Yeah, so I think this is a great question and a key question. As you are collecting data, this data need to be used to make business decision, accelerate the learning in our case, and on the research side and so on. And you look at every tool in your tool set to be able to address some complex problems. So how we structured ourselves is really to understand the business complexity or the business issues and the pain points that they are facing. And we apply different tools. In some cases, it's simple data analytics or dashboarding or metrics, but in other cases, the problems are more complex. They require operational excellence, Six Sigma or other tool set. And in other cases, well, the complexity cannot be handled by a human brain. The modeling is too complex. And in those cases, this is where we applied some machine learning, some AI, and in various settings. It can be on the research side, but it could be as well on the manufacturing side. A couple of examples is, for example, optimizing the sequence of messenger RNA. This is helped by some AI and machine learning, but this is coming from 4 years of data generation and data integration that allow us to do this. It didn't come overnight. Hey, we are going to flip AI and it's going to work. And we didn't try to boil the ocean with AI. We really looked at very pragmatic problems that are very painful and very complex to solve without using those techniques. So this is how we structured ourselves, and we have a central data science and AI team that focuses on multiple areas of the business, and they had the business knowledge. So we had in this team we have different type of people, and every type of people work with their correspondent function to be able to support.
I like how that's really being built up as a core capability that isn't necessarily just in one part of the business, but is being able to spread out across every single facet of it. And I think it's also an important lesson that you shared just then about the fact that this doesn't happen overnight. This is often a journey that involves a lot of questions, not just about technology, but about organization. And Jim, you and I spoke a little bit about this idea of the round trip of data and how you're working within IT now to be able to enable the rest of the business to take advantage of some of these tools. Could you talk a little bit about how you think about organizing data capabilities within Nationwide?
When you start to tackle problems around data, especially across a large organization, you start to find that data really exists still in silos. It's either a functional silo or a business silo. And when you kind of come back to what the customer is expecting, what used to be creepy is really becoming expected. And so customers are saying, hey, if you know this about me, why are you asking me more and more questions? And the biggest barrier to being able to really harness the data that we have about our customers to use it in ways that they find valuable is breaking down those silos. And so one of the things we've kind of found is you have to, at some point, centralize elements of the data, bringing in a chief data officer or an organization that's responsible for defining the standard way you're going to define data elements so that you can create the solutions that customers are asking for. But my message in this always is the reason that you centralize is to get something in control. And once you have it in control, then this element specifically needs to be pushed out as fast and as quickly as possible back to the business users who need it to make decisions on a day-to-day basis. Kind of back to that original premise of more and more decisions are going to be made by machines augmented by people. Well, people become the control. And the way that they are the control process around the use of data is being able to access to it, to be able to use the data to validate decision making, to make sure that we're not seeing bias come up in our models, to ensure that we're understanding what customers are feeling or seeing, and making sure that we're bringing that back into our models for how we run the company. And so this idea of a round trip is organizationally bring it in, centralize it, get it under control, get it standardized, and as quickly as possible, push it back out to those business partners who need to use it to make real decisions that impact customers.
Absolutely. And I really like how you highlighted the role that people will continue to play as they augment some of that technology, and what a critical role that is from an ethical standpoint all the way through to how you're best going to serve your customers. Jim, back to you a little bit, turning to that core belief that you mentioned about people really augmenting the technology. How does that feed into the narrative that you have at Nationwide around automation and the way that makes its way through the organization?
We think about, we've got to meet our member where they're at. So our members own us. So whether it's in our retirement solutions business, our personal lines or commercial lines, they own the business. We're investing to meet them and to meet them where they are. And so the way that our narrative runs around this is we have to have technology as a way to meet them in the moment. And so, this year alone, I mentioned we're an API-based business. We will process 3 billion transactions through APIs. But the interesting part that's really changed in the last 2 years is 20% of those transactions are coming from partners outside of Nationwide. One example of that is if you go into a Toyota dealership, we want to meet the member at the point they need the protection for the car. So we've now created an API where we link in and they can actually share telematics data and we can share quote data back and forth so that at a Toyota dealership, somebody can get their car protected. And by the way, because in this last year, we've learned people aren't driving their car as much, we can actually bring the telematics data around the vehicles they have already to the play so that we can actually give them discounts based on how they're driving their vehicle. So for us, it roots back into that customer expectation of meeting them in the moment that they need the protection and making sure that we're using technology to do it in a way that is valuable to them.
Yeah. And it's so important, I think, to your point, to tie it back to that customer journey. Because there are so many different conversations and thoughts about where automation might be heading and the way it's going to manifest itself, but really being able to keep the customer as the North Star is huge in terms of keeping that narrative going. Marcello, as I noted at the top of this, your title actually includes both digital transformation and operational excellence, which I assume includes a fair amount of automation as well. Can you talk a little bit about how you implement automation across Moderna and the way that you're using that to optimize certain processes?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I would differentiate between, at least in our setting, between digitization and automation, because I think it's important to differentiate. Because I believe that every function should be fully digitized. I don't believe that you should be automating everything until you have your processes mature. If not, you will slow down probably part of your business. And it depends on the businesses. So if you are in continuous change, you need to be fully digitized. You need the digitization probably to instruct people on what to do so we collect the data in the right way, in the right setting, and so on. And as those processes are maturing and stable, this is where you remove the human touch and put the automation in place, because you're confident that this will last and you don't have to change it the next week or the next month. And this is how we proceed. And why operational excellence is important, because when you are digitizing a process, you're digitizing it in a way that is different from the way you do it manually most of the time. Because if not, it will be paper on glass. And if the process is not working perfectly and you digitize it, probably it will continue to be imperfect process. And this is the least you want to do when you digitize and afterwards automate. So this is the concept, and this is how we went about most of the processes that we implemented, is really look at the efficiencies of those processes and look at how you implement them in a digital world. And this is where operational excellence and OE goes together, but as well where data science can go into the equation, because on some of the processes, the modeling will come from the data science piece rather than the optimization piece.
Oh, thank you. I may have to take that phrase, paper on glass. I think it's a great visual for thinking about the way that we sometimes digitize processes without rethinking the process itself and making sure that it's set for digital. A question for both of you, and Jim, we'll start with you. Many are in various stages of their own AI and analytics journey and really trying to reach scale with a lot of these data operations. And as you've gone through these journeys yourself, I'm curious if you have any tips for people who maybe are a little bit earlier on that journey on how you have either built out the strategy or some quick wins that have really helped you capitalize on the benefits that data provides and been able to grow those processes.
I'd say the first thing I would say is to tie it back to the economics of your business. At the end of the day, you could talk about this as being an outcome that you're trying to drive, a way you're trying to serve your customer, growth, bottom line, but the economics of the transaction have to hold true. And so how is taking what you know, the data, being able to predict something, artificial intelligence, machine learning, analytics, and applying it through automation and application, going to drive the economics of your business for you and your customer. And I think as long as you can do that, then all of a sudden you are directly connected to the outcome of your company, your business, and what you're trying to provide your consumer. And at the same time, simplifying the message that it really is about a three-legged stool of kind of data, what you know, what you can do with what you know, artificial intelligence or analytics, and then how you apply it within your application landscape to either automate something or to make a better decision about something.
Excellent. Thank you. How about you, Marcello? Any big lessons on scaling some of these AI initiatives?
Yeah, I think first of all, I would demystify it with the business because it's this nebulous thing that is AI. It is not. It's just another tool set in our box to solve problems. Second, go about it with pragmatism and from a business standpoint, what problem you're trying to solve, what issues you're trying to solve. And I think Jim mentioned data integration from the beginning, and I think this is a key piece here, is AI needs data, it needs robust data, it needs clean data. So when you're building your digital strategy, make sure that you build it with this full integration, so you're collecting the data and collect more data than you need. Data storage is cheap today because in some cases we applied AI on data that we never thought that we will use for that modeling. And that is why what I did with the team is really use those three principles when we built our AI and machine learning model.
Fantastic. Well, we've got about 1 minute left, so I'll leave you with one last question. I think one of the really interesting things that we found throughout this past 12 to 18 months is that as much as we try to set strategy, it's never really set in stone, and we really have to build our organizations to be nimble and adapt quickly to whatever it is that may come. And I'm curious if either of you have any thoughts on ways that you're leading your teams in a way that allows them to be both resilient and flexible as you prepare for even faster growth in the future. Jim, we'll go to you.
Yeah, I think one of the commonalities that you heard about across everybody who spoke today is allowing people to have failures, to be able to move quickly, be resilient, and move on to the next thing. This idea of agile isn't just in how we develop software, but it's being nimble when you mess something up that frankly you can learn faster by making a mistake and pivoting quickly. And that the hard part is that quick pivot, walking away from the failure to do something with it. But I think that's something you heard on all today that I've kind of found, especially in the last 3 years at Nationwide. The quicker we can pivot from the failures, the better.
Excellent. Thank you for that insight, Jim. Marcello, to you to close us out.
Yeah, I think for us, it's about flexibility. Look, we started the year before the COVID virus with a budget and a strategy that has completely and drastically changed. And across the year, we were adjusting and changing and shifting to be able to address the business need. You always need to look what are we doing that will bring value to the business and the strategy that the business is having. And flexibility is key, agility is key. I think everyone said it here, and I think that's the key piece in this context of rapid change.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Jim and Marcello, for a fantastic conversation. Really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your insights with us.